we received feedback from HUD that we should be including a note in our consolidated plan that we're using the uncapped income limits for qualifying beneficiaries for CDBG programs. And what that means is, HUD they publish area median income limits, and it's based on household size every year. But for the CDBG program, there are specific limits that are dictated, and they're based on the Section 8 income limits. So they're a little bit different than the area median income limits that they publish each year. However, there are certain communities, there are 10 communities across the country that are able to use what they call uncapped limits, where they're basically allowing you to go up to the true 80% of area median income for the region, and DC is one of them. So in order to take advantage of that, we've been taking advantage of that, but apparently we need to include that in our consolidated plan that we are doing that. So we're just taking that advice and adding it to this action plan or consolidated plan amendment request to kind of put everything all in one request to HUD. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel to talk a little bit about the Fair Housing Plan.
Great, thanks, Caitlin, and thank you for having me tonight. So as Caitlin mentioned, in order to actually submit the plan, we've received guidance from HUD that we need to amend our consolidated plan, and that's where you guys come in. So I just want to touch on real quickly kind of what the Fair Housing Plan is, the process that we went through, and kind of what some of the recommendations are, so that you have a better understanding of what's in the plan. So the Fair Housing Plan is a planning process, also known as the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, which is what it used to be called, for local governments and public housing agencies to really take meaningful action to overcome historic patterns of segregation, promote fair housing choice, and foster inclusive communities that are free from discrimination. So there's 4 real major components that are included. First, a robust community participation and comment process that allows for meaningful dialogue of key stakeholders, looking at an assessment of our past goals and actions of how we've done, analysis of data and issues that impact fair housing, and then finally this leads to the establishment of measurable fair housing goals and priorities. So fair housing and housing equity matters because fair housing choice really connects you to high-performing schools, diverse communities, job centers and employment opportunities, different transportation options, and safe and healthy neighborhoods. So the Regional Fair Housing Project Team was responsible for creating the Regional Fair Housing Plan, and project team members included representatives from 8 of the 24 local governments that make up the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, otherwise known as COG. This included Alexandria, Arlington, DC, Fairfax, Gaithersburg, Loudoun County, Montgomery County, and Prince William County. A consultant team which was responsible for much of the plan's technical work, logistics, data analysis, and writing. This team was led by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Also included the Urban Institute, Ochoa Urban Collaborative, did a lot of our outreach, and we had a HUD technical assistance partner, which was Enterprise Community Partners. We also had a community advisory committee. This was comprised of organizations representing people impacted by fair housing choice. They really worked alongside the project team to help ensure that the final plan includes critical insights for addressing barriers and developing solutions to really achieve fair housing choice. Those organizations are shown here. So this is the first time in 25 years that local jurisdictions have joined together to create a joint plan for Metropolitan Washington. And Caitlin alluded to how long it's taken. We kind of really started thinking about this and kicked it off back in December 2017. So it's been years in the making, but the planning effort really got underway in January 2021. From that, there was an extensive data collection and analysis, as well as numerous opportunities for community engagement. I think the project team, as well as the Ochoa Urban Collective, did a great job on that. So the plan was released in February of this year for a 60-day public comment period, and that closed on March 31st. So there are 7 regional goals and strategies that are derived from that multi-year planning study that resulted from, as I just mentioned, that looking at that regional and local data and all those engagement opportunities that included focus groups, surveys, a number of civic meetings, many of which were held right here in Arlington, mostly virtual, of course. The regional goals are implemented as local goals, and some jurisdictions have additional goals specific only to their community. As you'll see, Arlington has a number that are specific just to Arlington, and I'll highlight some of those after each regional goal. So we're looking at kind of limited goals to be implemented effectively. So we've selected those that have the greatest possible impact for moving fair housing choice in DC, the DC area. So, these are just like our comp plan, meant to be kind of implemented over a 5-year plan, 5-year period. So the first goal, which applies to Arlington as well as its neighboring jurisdiction, is increase the supply of housing that is affordable to families with incomes that 60% of area median income are below. Is particularly in areas that have historically lacked such housing. Some of the strategies that we're all committed to working on together are listed here, such as lowering the income targeting for our affordable housing, and exploring using additional local government financing and regulatory tools that we are not currently using. In addition to strategies shared previously, Arlington County has committed to take additional actions that work toward this shared goal. First recommendation is to continue to encourage developers to exceed the required number of affordable accessible units in a range of sizes and types when new development occurs. Second, really looking at deepening our affordability of affordable housing. This was something that was very evident in our focus groups as well as the data. Next is to explore mechanisms to reduce county fees and related infrastructure costs for 100% affordable developments. Provide incentives or low interest loans for homeowners who rent their accessory dwellings to low and moderate income tenants. Lastly, here we're undertaking a new homeownership study, as you are aware of, that would take a step back from our homeownership programs to really develop clear goals for our approach to homeownership. Second goal is to reform zoning and land use policies to expand access to fair housing choice by increasing the development, geographic distribution, and supply of affordable housing. So the first strategy is to increase inclusionary zoning incentives for creating on-site affordable housing. Next, adopt affordable housing overlay zones to increase the amount of land where developments that meet robust affordability criteria are allowed as of right, and incorporate a fair housing equity analysis into the review of significant zoning proposals and specific plans. For Arlington specific, looking at initiating a zoning study to examine alternatives to the current definition of family in the zoning ordinance, something we've been looking at for a little while now. And secondly, really to initiate a study to examine how affordability requirement could be structured within the zoning ordinance for senior housing projects that are approved via site plan. Goal 3 is implement preservation policies designed to preserve affordable housing and prevent displacement with a goal of no net loss of existing affordable rental units. The regional strategy that relates to Arlington is to track affordable housing developments with expiring subsidy contracts and to adopt a proactive approach and prioritize resources for the preservation of that housing. Specific to Arlington, we are going to periodically reevaluate the real estate tax relief program, explore reopening the housing choice voucher primary waiting lists in order to solicit new income eligible households seeking that rental subsidy. Periodically review the housing grant program eligibility and maximum allowable rents. And lastly here, consider developing a program to provide financial and technical support to low and moderate income homeowners for things such as small repairs, estate planning, taxes, aging in place. Goal 4 is increase the number of homeowners in the region and reduce inequities and discriminatory practices that limit homeownership opportunities by members of protected classes. So regional strategies include increasing homeownership opportunities for those members and support current homeowners with protected characteristics, as well as addressing issues of appraisal bias and increase fair housing testing and monitoring for lenders and real estate entities. So goal 5 is protect the housing rights of individuals and strengthen fair housing education. Regional strategies include reducing barriers to accessing rental housing by eliminating application fees for voucher holders and encouraging landlords to follow HUD's guidance on the use of criminal backgrounds and screening tenants. Pilot a right to counsel program to ensure legal representation for tenants in landlord-tenant proceedings, and expand and increase support for fair housing outreach, education, and enforcement. Specific to Arlington, we want to increase the frequency of fair housing testing, provide education and outreach to potential first-time home buyers, amend the county's human rights ordinance to include all protected classes, and lastly, reduce language barriers when seeking housing services. Goal 6 is increase community integration and reduce housing barriers for persons with disabilities. This includes prioritizing home and CDBG funds for developments that include those permanent supportive housing units, and advocate for new multifamily developments with public funds to have at least 10% of total units accessible to persons with mobility disabilities, and at least 4% accessible for persons with hearing or visual disabilities. For Arlington, we want to ensure that all accessible units in future committed affordable housing developments provide the same features as standard units, and to develop a rental accessibility modification program, which I hear you've already funded through your CD program, which is great. Goal 7 is expand access and affordability of public transportation for members of protected classes. Strategies include providing free bus transportation to low-income households and to study and make recommendations to improve and expand bus routes across borders. Initial Arlington goal is to increase effectiveness of existing programs to further fair housing. This includes the review of current metrics for goals and to implement an equity analysis with metrics across program areas, and to develop a plan and mechanism for collecting reliable demographic data of residents of our committed affordable housing. So as far as next steps, we plan to take the amendment to the consolidated plan, which includes this regional fair housing plan, to the July board meeting. And from that, I think the goal from COG's perspective is to submit as a region to HUD the full fair housing plan. So that is the end of my presentation. Willing to take any questions if there are any.
Hey Joel, how are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Well, do you go to the slide 1 describing Arlington's priority responses? I believe it's the subpoint 1 of that slide.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry, which one was it you're looking for?
The draft Arlington strategies for goal 1, I believe. There you go. I just had a question about your first point. So you mentioned pushing for an increase in supply of housing affordable to low and moderate income families. I know something that's come up in a lot of conversations here is when we look at incentivizing money instead of going to AHIP, right? Building more affordable housing. Is there some way that the county has considered being able to incentivize that in any way? I assume this would be something we'd have to go to Richmond for, but given this is a regional draft plan, specifically for Arlington, is there something that can be done locally in the meantime? Because at the moment, there's an incentive to simply donate money to AHIP instead of actually creating more CAF units. So if you could speak to that to whatever extent we could do something here in Arlington.
Yeah, so I think, what we were thinking about it on this is, I think what I had mentioned in the presentation was that this was definitely a need that was highlighted in not only our affordable housing master plan housing needs analysis, but also through the public outreach that we went through for the fair housing plan. So I think what we had envisioned this was to provide incentives for the inclusion of extremely affordable housing units that are financed by the county, and also looking at projects that that seek refinancing through the county that had already gotten their funding, but are coming back in to see if we can adjust those affordability covenants to increase the share of units that are not at 60 but lower to to 40% or 30%. That's where we're really seeing the need in some of these committed affordable units. And then I think lastly, encourage owners of existing affordable units to explore, collaborative approaches to increasing the share of units dedicated to those lower affordability levels. And I think to your point, I think there is an interest in having the conversation of, units that we get through our site plan process to be on site. I think that's a conversation that we need to have, whether or not we get the cash for those. There's some benefits to getting the cash. We could potentially get more units elsewhere, but there's also benefits to potentially getting those units on site, such as expanding our geographic distribution goal.
Thank you.
So I'll just mention that the Housing Commission is obviously very interested in what you're referring to, and we've had numerous, really every meeting discussions over that. And, we continue to voice that desire, but we can't change the real, there's not a whole lot of carrots that we can give. And the stick is what it is because it comes out of Richmond.
I have a question about the one about the Arlington specific strategy about preserving existing affordable housing, like maybe 5 or 4. Do you foresee any response from particularly opponents of the missing middle, or I guess people who are not really on board with it, related to preserving affordable units versus what they foresee as missing middle, encouraging those older housing stock to be redeveloped into multi-unit property? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think what this goal in particular, goal 3, is really looking at what our existing portfolio of committed affordable units and making sure that we are able to, when that affordability period expires, that we're able to kind of keep them affordable in some way. Or if they are currently, I think what you're kind of getting at is some of the market affordable, some of those, like a Barcroft, making sure that we're keeping an eye on those older projects and working, with the developer, working with the neighborhood to ensure that, that project continues to be affordable going forward. The missing middle, I think, is kind of a little bit different conversation. And we have that recommendation under kind of reforming some zoning and land use, which has already happened, but I think there's some steps that need to continue to happen there, and I'm not the right person to talk to that about, but yeah.
No, that was helpful clarification that I was thinking, I had in my head on that goal 3, I guess, like single family, older housing stock that is kind of by market affordable. And that's where some of the middle folks are concerned that those are going to get, you know, demolished for the multi-unit. I'm just, yeah, I was just wondering if like you foresaw any issues with that. Obviously, probably appreciate the fire here.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? You're kind of cutting in and out. Sorry.
No, the clarification you provided was helpful.
Okay, thank you.
The differences.
Good, quick presentation.
Any other questions for Joel about the fair housing plan? Oh, yes.
Sorry, I actually have one more question. It kind of goes towards, I think it was point 7, strategy 7, detailing what steps the county could take in order to reach fair housing goals related to protected classes. So I know that right now Arlington doesn't actually observe all the protected classes that Richmond lays out. I forget how many we actually observe, but out of the 8 now that Richmond dictated, we may only observe, I believe, 6 or 7. So if that's the case, is there any conversation right now that's, and this might be out of your wheelhouse, so I apologize for that, but and looking at how the county could potentially work with affordable housing partners to ensure that units are compliant with any of the various needs that several of our members of the community have, wouldn't the county first have to recognize the full breadth of protected classes?
Yes, thank you for that. That's a great question. So we are working with our Human Rights Office as well as the Human Rights Commission to work towards getting all of those in. I think we're starting with source of income to try and get that into our local ordinance. And we've also started on education to landlords about this recent, I mean, it hasn't been too recent, but making sure that landlords know that this is a law now that they need to follow. And I don't know if Jennifer has anything to add to that.
No, that was a good answer. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? Well, Laura, I think there would need to be an action to recommend approval of the amendment.
And so to make sure I'm clear, I do have a question. Make sure I'm clear, our action would be to recommend approval of both the fair housing plan and the amendments that come to the.
Yeah, it's kind of all in one, but yes. That would be the action.
Yeah, so that is our action. Anyone?
So moved.
To approve,
Yes.
for the board to approve the
Right.
Amendment.
I guess.
Right?
You're assuming.
Oh, we have to vote. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are you opposed?
I'm sorry. Anybody opposed?
Okay, now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
good.
Thank you for helping me through this. Someday.
Details,
Someday.
details.
Well, thank you so much, Joel. That was a really good presentation.
Great,
Appreciate
thank you. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
think we are taking a look at the new FY25 NOFA.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take this one. And I'm gonna pull it up on the screen, but from my computer, so just bear with me first. Right. So, we are gearing up for the release of the 2025 Notice of Funding Availability for the Community Development Fund. And we typically like to have CDCAC review the NOFA just to make sure that we, are putting out something that everyone agrees with and is happy with for the next fiscal year. There actually weren't a lot of changes this year. We made a lot of changes than the previous year. But I will, since I think, most people in the room have actually gone through the process before, but I'm still going to go through just the contents of the NOFA and talk a little bit about the process and when we're going to get started and all that good stuff. So, and actually it's really small there. Can't figure out how to make this fit to screen. Oh wait,
That looks pretty good.
There we go. Oh, that's even smaller. There we go. That's better. Okay. So just the first part of the NOFA, it talks a little bit about the various funding sources, what they are, and how the funds are administered. Again, they're administered for 1 year. For most of the sources, AHIP housing services are awarded for 2 years. So there's just a little bit of a difference there. We also talk a little bit about the differences between the amount of funding that organizations can apply for. So public services, organizations are eligible to apply for up to $50,000. And public services are really range from anything that, could be job training, health-related programs, youth programs, senior programs, resident services programs. And so again, those programs can apply for up to $50,000. And then there are other programs where we are allowed to spend a little bit more money just based on how HUD caps the funding source. And so those types of programs are housing development, homeownership counseling, economic development, certain economic development programs, business development, and those types of programs. So those are eligible to apply for grants up to $100,000. These are the funding priorities for applicants to the NOFA this year. And again, it's actually dictated by the consolidated plan that we just heard from Joel about, although he was talking about a very specific piece of it. But these are the funding priorities that were laid out in the last consolidated plan. And so any applicant that applies has to respond to one of these goals and priorities. Talk a little bit about eligibility requirements. There are different eligibility requirements for each of the sources. And we wanted to be really clear about what those eligibility requirements are. So community development block grant and community services block grant have pretty specific eligibility requirements. They're outlined here. Temporary assistance for a needy family have some additional requirements that have to be met, and then same with the AHIP housing services funding. Typically, AHIP housing services, we look for projects that are housing related in some way and or are provided at a committed affordable housing property. Provided at this is just a quick look at what types of programs were funded through the 2024 Community Development Fund. This year, this actually is probably a little bit more, I'm actually going to change this graph because goal one, it seems a lot bigger than it actually should be, and that's because we provided our moderate income purchase assistance program with a lot of funding last year. That technically falls under goal 1, but that program is a county program that doesn't come in competitively for funding, so I don't think it should be included here. So I will make that note to change that. But otherwise, typically, goals 2 and 3 are the bigger funding programs or categories, and that's where majority of the funding goes. These are the federal income limits. So we talked a little bit about this when I was talking about the consolidated plan. And so basically any program that applies for funding, they have to ensure that the beneficiaries of those programs fall within these income ranges. And so what I was talking about before is that we are using the uncapped 80% of AMI limits. So if we were to use the capped limits, this top line here would be much lower than it is now.
On that chart, the income level, the shaded area is number of occupants?
Yeah, households.
Okay.
Yep. Number of households, yeah. So then this page just describes the submission requirements. Proposals have to be submitted electronically through Zoom grants. I will go over with you guys the timeline. So we're proposing to release the NOFA on July 5th. And we will be doing again a NOFA workshop this year. So what we like to do for this is, of course, do an overview of the NOFA, but then we also like to do a specific one-off kind of workshop where we have someone come talk about ways to improve their, an application. And this year we're going to be doing a telling your story training. So it's really about helping applicants figure out better ways to explain what their program is and, have a better, so that the average reader will have a better understanding of what they're actually trying to do. So the proposals this year will be due on September 8th. And so for everyone in this room's benefit, what that means is usually we try to get the proposals turned around to you guys within 2 weeks of that. So you should be able to start reviewing applications at the end of September this year, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then again, in October and November, we meet every Wednesday to meet with the applicants. And we'll, the schedule for that is determined once the applications are in and we can kind of arrange everything. And then once those interviews have been completed, we then do our ranking exercise where we rank all the proposals based on priority. And then we start building up the budget, and that's included in the county manager's proposed budget in February. There are hearings in March, both with CDCAC to review the action plan and the budget recommendation, and also through the county board does their regular budget hearings in March, and then the board typically approves the budget in April. So once all that's done, then the funds are available starting July 1st. This is just some information about, what the workshop is and sort of what were the proposal presentations and how to prepare. The question and feedback page. And then we get into setting up a Zoom Grants account, which is required to be able to submit an application. And then we get into finally the required contents of the proposal. We are asking pretty much the same questions. I think we tweaked a couple just based on some feedback from last year. But again, generally very, very, very similar. We're looking at overall program design, community needs, collaboration with other organizations, long-term strategy and project sustainability, goals, objectives, and outcomes, and the evaluation plan, and then some more specific information about the organization's history and experience and capacity. We also allow applicants to provide 3 letters of community support, and while those are not required, they are strongly encouraged. budget and leveraging. This just talks a little bit about what you can and can't include as an eligible cost in your budget and how we calculate the leverage score. We also provide a little bit more information about what is to be included in the budget narrative. And we also provide information about the proposal evaluation form, so what their application will be graded against. So that's basically it. I wanted to, oh, Steve, you have a question.
I was gonna mention something, but I
Sure.
didn't want to cut you off.
No, go for it. Cut me off. Yeah. Fine.
Page 8, it says the workshop is at 10 o'clock at night.
Oh. Uh-oh. It wouldn't be a late night. Okay, we'll fix that.
I think you were trying to reach out to people who had not applied before, and so you had 2 suggestions. One on page 2, and it may seem obvious, but the last line in bold, it says applying for a community development fund does not guarantee funding under one specific source. But then does it guarantee funding, but just not under one particular source,
Okay.
which it doesn't, but
What page is that? Sorry.
page 2.
Page 2.
Could you say does not guarantee funding under any specific source? Is that who-
On page 3, I have a question.
Sure.
Your point 1.1, the goal, increase the supply of committed affordable housing units. Nothing in the proposals will clearly enable the supply. The supply is really the builders, the contractors, et cetera.
Yeah.
So how do we evaluate?
So traditionally, we have, and it doesn't happen every year because we don't get enough CDBG or home funding to do a project every year. But when we do have sufficient funding, we will sometimes allocate CDBG or home to an affordable housing property. And that's typically how we meet that priority and that goal. So for example, well, for example, on our tour this year, we visited the Cadence, and that was partially funded with CDBG. No, actually, sorry, that was partially funded with home funding. And actually, no, both. Sorry, I'm getting projects mixed up. So that was partially funded with both CDBG and home funding. So it's usually on an as-needed basis. And when we have enough funding, we'll recommend that CDBG and home be allocated to a project. And in the past, when that's happened, it hasn't been for a few years, but those projects will actually come before CDCAC, and the developer will come and talk about the project, and CDCAC votes on it and recommends it, just as well as the Housing Commission does it.
So the nonprofits may suggest, and that would be it.
It wouldn't necessarily come in through this NOFA. It would, if they were applying for funding, it would probably come in through our multifamily NOFA, which is a completely separate process.
Okay.
That's what I was going to ask is these goals, just to confirm, are beyond, they extend beyond just what we're doing here. And so potentially none of the proposals we evaluate will meet goal 1.1, but as long as they meet some other, if they could propose to meet goal number 1 through one of these other sub-goals. Right? Sure, and several of our programs do. And I mean, it's the same for goal 3. We don't see a lot of programs that come in for funding that are specifically supporting homelessness, but we work with our colleagues in the Department of Human Services to develop these priorities, because it's they obviously have a lot of different programs that they offer through that support those priorities.
These objectives can motivate the applicants to dream.
Sure, yeah. I like that.
One question in just looking at some of the descriptions on page 11, program design. I know we had, in most instances when we asked questions of the applicants. We wanted them to sort of differentiate who are you serving within Arlington and who maybe you'd be serving outside of Arlington. And so I didn't know whether we wanted to add any specificity in the description of where we ask, who populations and beneficiaries, whether even as much as to say, be as specific as possible.
Yeah, so we do have the third question is about geographic area. So
Okay.
would it make sense to maybe add a note in there about like how many clients are you serving in Arlington versus the remainder, like the rest of the Northern Virginia area, or is that important information or context for you?
I know that was a question that got asked a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
At least my point of reference is 1 year, so that's not. Maybe it didn't get asked much in prior years, but it certainly got asked.
Sure, I can add some more context into that question that has to differentiate between Arlington versus other.
And then I know that on like item number 8, which is around the project sustainability, that was also a big issue. And somehow a lot of the applicants, and maybe the workshop covers this, so it's less of an issue, but maybe we need to, the prompt question needs to be a little bit more specific as to, if you did not have this funding, how would you continue to support and grow your program, or something to that extent, because somehow, like, project sustainability just doesn't seem to resonate with a lot of the groups as to what that really means.
Yeah, we struggle with this question almost every year. It changes, and I actually did tweak it this year. I don't have the way it was worded last year.
I don't have the answer necessarily for the tweet.
Yeah, but I like that. We can try adding that in there. Yeah.
And I think going back to the geographic area thing, like, there's kind of like, maybe we can get it sort of two parts of it. One is like, where is like the, where will the programs be located? But then there's also where are the people being served coming from, right? Because often we do get like, our offices are located at whatever Wilson Boulevard, and that doesn't really tell us much about who's being served and where they're coming from.
Some of them, when we peeled it back one level, it became obvious that because a number of these serve sort of the region, that they were actually serving more folks from outside of in Alexandria or Falls Church.
So many of these programs are not, people are coming to our offices to be served. They are out in the field or, going from location to location, from school to school, or whatever it is. And so, I don't know. Maybe these questions are specific enough, but oftentimes we still get just like, our offices are located here.
Could I mention on the long-term strategy, I like the idea that you mentioned, but there's still the question that we've never answered. How will the project eventually become self-sufficient, which I think is a great question, but do we really want or expect that? Grantees have been coming, 10, 20 years, how long has this been around? And do we really expect them to become self-sufficient? I would hope so, but do we? Do we grade them on that?
I thought that was a placeholder for that conversation.
But my question is not to the applicants, my question is to us, not necessarily
It's a
for now.
policy question.
Oh, I thought it was our policy to germinate things so that they could become self-sufficient.
We've talked about that, but none of ever have.
Yeah,
But this is the closest wording to this.
Oh, yeah, no, I love this question. I was just wondering whether it was kind of misleading.
Looks like-
We've never kind of held them accountable.
Correct.
So Jennifer, it looks like you have some thoughts on that.
Of course I do. Well, yeah, I mean, you all know we have this conversation every year, and just here, my thoughts on it are some of the projects I think are able to become self-sufficient. Some really aren't. I mean, some of them, they're just are not, for want of a better word, some of them are sexier and they're more able to, bring in foundation funding, or they're able to, create some sort of, social impact, their own funding, and some of them just aren't. So the way I interpret this is sort of depending on the project, and a lot of times they won't answer the question directly. They'll answer, well, we're gonna grow our program and we're gonna bring in other stuff, but they're not able to be really specific. So I feel like there's got to be a context. So as you're reviewing this, no matter how we frame this question, like I don't think you can look at every single proposal in the same way, just because they're different kinds of projects and will have different kinds of needs. So that's my 2 cents.
That's a good
But
point.
I hear you say you want that to be answered.
Well, we expect, I mean, people have to answer something, and some are able to say, yes, in 2 years, we're gonna,
Right.
we're gonna do A, B, C, and D, and some just aren't. And there's some, as you all know, we've been funding for 1,000,000 years, and we years and years ago, we tried actually having like a 3 years and you're out thing with our projects, for those of you who have been around that long. And it was challenging because some of the projects would have really suffered. And maybe that's maybe a way to frame it. And I like what Margaret suggested. Basically, what would you do if you didn't get the funding? And I know we often ask that as part of this sort of interview, because that's really the bottom line. Like if an organization says, oh yeah, we would still go, or we would, serve slightly fewer people, or we would find other funding, that's one thing. But if they say our whole organization would fold, that's kind of a different conversation. So maybe asking it in both ways might be helpful for more context. I don't know.
Or if we want to, I think we ask for their project budgets, but we don't necessarily ask for their organizational.
It is currently optional,
Okay.
and we can make it. It used to be required. We had heard some feedback from some of the smaller nonprofits in the county that asking for. I mean, there's a whole list of documents that used to be required, and it was a little bit cumbersome to provide all those documents. Of course, some of them, they're required. We have to have them in order to grant funding to the organization. So the way we kind of got around that was not requiring them at the time of application, but if they were funded, they would be required to submit. It's like all their 4990 and all the various. But I mean, I could see the organizational budget being helpful as part of the review. So if you all are interested in seeing that, then
that was the other thing that sort of came up.
Yeah.
As a lot of budget questions was sort of looking at it in the context of their overall budget. So did we end up being, a primary, like you said, sort of without us, they might miss half their budget or whatever. And I think that's not that that's a end all or break all, but I think it's useful to see.
Would you consider a slight tweak instead of, the assumption there is that you must become self-sufficient. So could the question be, can the project become self-sufficient, and when or how?
Good,
I
good,
like that.
good.
As opposed
I
to
like
putting
that.
some sort of time.
I love that.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
That's great.
Love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yay, Steve. It only took us, 30 years to get that one.
That was my very first meeting. That was my.
But I do think, because the other thing I think we would want to be encouraging is that they're always striving to find other funding.
Sure. Yes.
So we don't want to encourage complacency.
And I want
No,
to
and we do also measure how much I mean, there's a score for how much they're leveraging with other
leverage.
funding. So that is another piece.
That does help.
Yeah. But I mean, as Caitlin said, the balance for us is we really are trying to be supportive of small startup organizations as well that aren't necessarily going to be as sophisticated or have as many funding sources, so it's a context. If you're a brand new organization and this is your first grant to get you started, I think you need to look at it a little differently than if you're a large sophisticated organization with multiple funding streams. So I think the whole, look between this question and the leverage score and just the narrative, it helps, I think, provide additional context.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask, is there any way to like, I know I would like the budget, like seeing a more comprehensive package. Is there any way to like allow them to submit some of the documents on like the night they present to us? So that way they get another 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah,
Well, an organizational budget shouldn't be a hard
no,
ask.
it shouldn't, yeah.
If they're
I'm-
audited, they have to produce
Yeah.
that.
Well, I just want to give them more time.
It's not a big ask.
Yeah, but I just thought maybe giving them more time and also, well, like, we don't have to have our scores due till the end of everything, right? Which
That's what we learned last year.
I learned that the hard way by doing 6 a week.
We're
But no, I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we could definitely do that. I mean, I think the way we've approached it is we require the documents that are required in order for us to fund them as an organization. So their tax exempt status, their articles of incorporation. The Form 990 was helpful for review. We added that as a required document last year because some folks had thought that was helpful to see, what their financial status was in their review. And I think that is another way of seeing that. But we can definitely add organizational budget as required. I think that's, like you said, if they're getting an audit done, which most of them should be getting an audit done, it's required. So they should have it.
Well, but their 990 is going to show their organizational budget too.
Well,
But not to the
require that.
level of detail, probably.
That's what, I can't remember what the 990 looked like, so I can't tell whether that is.
It's your tax form, so it's your revenue, your expense. It's
Yeah,
organizational
that
tax
doesn't
form.
break it down by source.
Yeah, I don't think that the Form 990 shows.
I don't think it does. No.
Yeah, it's, I want to see.
More
you're
general
gonna have
than it is anything.
multiple source, I mean, truthfully, I could care, well, except I know he always has good comments. But yes, but, he liked to see, the balance of how much of this is, staff, how much of it is other
What your expenditures are.
supplies or whatever, and yeah. But I'm more interested in what are your sources of funding from this perspective.
Sure.
Well, and also kind of outside of the budget, and correct me if I'm thinking about this wrong, but like, in terms of thinking about like, if this doesn't get funded by us, will the whole organization kind of?
Yeah,
fold?
that's.
We're reviewing a program, not an organization. And so even if it is a small kind of startup and this is one of their only things that they're doing, we're still looking at the program.
Right.
And so this is not something that I don't think we need to ask in the application, but kind of as we're looking at applications, taking a look at what this program is in relation to what this organization does.
Right. Does the program itself have
And-
legs rather than
right.
evaluating the company itself?
And also, does the organization have legs regardless of whether this program gets funded?
Right. If the organization doesn't have the capacity, like if they're over-promising in their ask, and you look at the organization, it's like, well, you don't have the means to sustain what you're telling me. You're giving me this very nice sounding thing, but you as an organization can't actually pony up what you need to make it work. Then you can look at it and go, oh, this is fanciful. Like this isn't actually gonna work.
And then to go off of all these comments, I wanted to make sure I understood correctly. So the amount of money that we give them or that they ask for cannot go to their staffing needs, correct?
It can.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay, absolutely.
That's what Tim was on about, that,
Yeah.
what
Which one
we're
was?
In
It
most
can't contribute
cases,
to,
it
and it can't contribute to what?
So typically, we can't allocate our funding to like anything that could be considered an income payment, so going directly to a beneficiary.
That's
So,
right, yeah, okay.
yeah, so like, there are rules within HUD with how long and under what circumstances you can fund programs like that. So we were able to do it with COVID because there was an emergency declaration and you can only do it you can only allocate funding for up to 6 months, had to go directly to the landlord. But so anything that could be considered income to a beneficiary, like rent or utilities or like a gift card
Okay.
or transportation, like that kind of stuff, you have to be really careful about how it's funded. So we typically don't fund those types of programs because it's very tricky.
but we could fund programs where they're paying like a staff member.
Yeah,
salary.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's mostly.
Yeah.
And
I was
mostly
gonna
what we
say-
pay for. Yeah, it's actually the easiest.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because that makes sense. I thought. Yeah, but I think, at the end of the day, I think we're just like ultimately up to you as staff to make the final decision. It's just us to make the recommendation.
Mhm.
But I think what we have, comfortably.
Can I make one last comment?
course.
Which I know has to do with the process, and I know I'm gonna probably fall on deaf ears, but I just can't. So, I was quite amazed that the entire commission reviews all of the proposals, because I've never seen that before. So usually with grant reviews, they, you like, a group of 3 people review 10 applications, another 3 people review another 10 applications, and then you can have group discussion around those so others can like ask questions and weigh in before final scores go in. But I just found it remarkable that the entire commission reviewed all of the applications. And so I just would throw out the fact that that is not the norm.
Is it good or bad? You haven't said whether it's good or bad.
That is an element, yes.
A question about that, is it, in that it's atypical to have the
Very.
entire commission review all of the applications?
In addition to the staff.
Right. What are the particular benefits in having the setup you laid out where a group of 3 look at 10 and a group of 3 look at 10 versus having the entire commission?
I mean, normally that's done just so that you're not burdening people with many, many, many hours of review and potentially people who can't end up reviewing, and there's concern about if you don't review everybody doesn't review all of them.
Right.
If that's how it's set up, then that's problematic. And sometimes you may get, you're already going to have to take off the polarized things because you're looking for a common, you're looking for a range. So it just tends to make it a little bit cleaner for the most part, but it's mostly just that it's sort of overkill.
Well, and you mentioned this, Margaret, but like.
Sorry.
No, I mean, something you mentioned earlier that I wanted to add to is another advantage is if like Margaret and Link and I are all reviewing the same set of applications, we can all sit down and have a conversation and say, well, I said this and I saw this piece of the proposal and I thought that was really good. And, and Link says, oh, I didn't notice that. Good point. And we can kind of make sure that we're all sort of seeing everything about the application and talking about it.
And you tend to, if somebody's just working on 10 or whatever the number is, then you tend to get a little, then they're going to really dedicate to that 10, scrutinize them. Whereas if somebody's trying to cover 50, they're guaranteed some of those are going to get shortcut a little bit.
It has its advantages.
I just threw it out there.
Yeah, I think it's something to consider. I remember you saying this last year. I think we're not totally prepared to completely revamp the process quite yet, but yeah, I think it's a good suggestion and maybe something that we probably would need to take a little bit more time than we currently have until the review cycle this year to really think about how the process would work. Because I would also worry about like how are you normalizing scores, and if someone doesn't actually complete their scores, how do you make sure that the proposals are actually being reviewed by a consistent number of reviewers? So yeah, I have some.
And it does sort of require people to be committed to their subgroup.
Right.
But
I think it would also require us, or like, we would have to set some more stringent guidance about what different scores mean than we currently have, because right now we're all kind of like, as long as you review consistently across, even if you're a hard scorer and you're an easy scorer, it all kind of, as long as you're consistent, it all kind of works out. But if the three of us are the hardest scorers in the whole group and we're reviewing these 10, we're gonna. Yeah.
Right. If an 8
And that's
means
a lot
something
of-
different to you than it does to me,
Right.
then all of your scores are going to naturally skew negative because you value an 8 far more than I am an 8.
And
And if there's not, like you said, there's not a standardization of that, we're all working on a common understanding of what these values mean, then you're going to get some scores which are just glowing, right? And others which are dismal.
And the effort of creating that standardization is pretty significant.
It is, and so that's why an alternative option is that you have a larger, there's like 5 people reviewing them or something, or something like that. So that it tends, because truthfully, the like statistical norms tend to
Oh, wow.
blow out.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, if they didn't, all of the grants management world wouldn't operate that way. But they do tend to, especially the larger your group
Mhm.
becomes.
We often have someone that suggests something, and everybody says, oh, I hadn't thought about it.
Right.
Just like you're getting the right wording. We wouldn't have got there if we hadn't had that discussion collectively.
And I hadn't thought about it in advance. Would it be practical, I'm trying to figure the middle ground here, because I tend to be a much tougher scorer, and that was fine as long as I was consistent. And I still think we should all be tougher, because I don't think they should all come in such a narrow range. Why do we have 1 to 10 if we never use 1 to 5? Never. Yeah. I mean, but anyway, I lost that one, so I'll move on. Would it be practical to group the review committees by area? So for example, I don't know how you decide exactly how much money goes for each of the areas, but when we do our dots, we have so many dots for this area, so many dots for that area. Would it be possible to have the same subgroup look at all of these relative, consistent or programs that are consistent? I mean, I'm not talking about the language, I'm not using the language.
Yeah. That makes sense, because then you get like area experts and such in a way, right? Where you're not only thinking about, I think a way to get what you're saying of being more critical is when you have people who are more inclined to subject matter because they know what they're looking for, right? I have a propensity towards housing, so I'm going to be looking at housing more critically, and my scores are probably going to be a bit more rigorous because I know what to look for. But if I'm not acquainted with, say, programs with aging, like it is, then he's going to be like, okay, I know what to look for here. I know what deserves money. I know what doesn't deserve money. And so I think, to your point, we have these areas of expertise. You'll kind of get that whittling down into looking for when we start using more 4s and 5s because we're not as stretched out. Our bandwidth is smaller. Naturally have a bit more discernment in the process.
Yeah.
I think how we have it currently is pretty good, to be honest with you. I think because you get the people, like it includes everything. It includes people, everyone gets to review things that they're passionate about, that they have expertise on, things they aren't as like knowledgeable about. But then you have folks who know that content area. But also, how many applications did we have last year? Like 48? So for that 48 applicants, each of them gave a 15-minute presentation. Then you have to have us do a presentation or just have like a spiel after each one. I think it's just 2 times. From other groups it might work, or for other commissions it might work, but like the timing of this is so important. I think how we have it currently is just, it's the right fit for right now, I think.
I'm definitely not opposed to exploring ways that we could, move in that direction. But yeah, I think we would need to kind of think about it and figure out the right way. I like the idea of identifying areas of expertise. And yeah, we can figure out hopefully a happy medium. Maybe not this year, but
I
might be getting close.
just had the process improvement
I
side.
love it.
My
No, it's good.
persona just couldn't stand by. That's all.
I understand.
I understand.
Stick around.
Yeah.
I think it's important though that we do like look at our processes critically because just because we've done something for so many years is the best way to do it.
Sure.
And there are benefits, of course, as Nicholas said, right, to having a process where people can spread out the work, where you're not doubling up and you're aware of the time requirements. But at the same time, if our job is to critically evaluate all these applications, but not doing that very well, then it's kind of like we're doing the wrong thing fast, right? It's like, oh, well, we wasted time regardless, right? We could have been more practical with our resources. And like you said, it's probably going to be a happy medium there somewhere.
I actually have a couple questions for you all just about process. Last year, for the proposal presentations, we were all in person, obviously, because we had to be. But the applicants were virtual. Did you guys like the way that worked? Should we try it different? You like that? Okay. I think there might have been, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that this year. And I think I'm inclined to keep it the way it was last year, but I'm open to feedback.
I think that really worked.
Yeah.
That was great. It really kept, not so much any kind of interaction, but it
Kept
just.
it on time,
Yes,
yeah.
It worked. And you had everything under control with time-wise. So it really
It kept things moving, and I think the other side is that it burdened for applicants less too, because they could do it in 15 minutes
Sure.
from wherever they were.
Wherever, yeah, that's
Versus the travel time and the waiting.
Right.
And it's-
Paying for parking and everything.
Yeah.
Well, and parking.
And my own process is tons of paper. Because I've read stuff, I have notes, I have this, and when they come in personally, I feel I have to look at them. They're presenting and they're talking, I have to look at them. I can't be flipping back and forth and double checking this. If they say something, I go, oh, I go flip to it. I can't do that when you're sitting.
Sure.
So what I do is, as soon as they leave the room, I'm done with my scoring for them. Because
Right.
I've been doing it along as
listening.
you're going through.
Yeah.
And then, you go back and look again, but I can't do that if they're talking and I'm sitting there, because it'd be rude to do that.
Is there any way to ask them or have like a requirement that they have to be like in like one certain place? Because the one guy last year was out driving.
Oh, yeah.
During it,
But he didn't get funded.
Yeah. So if there was a way to like require them to like have their, I know that I hate like even having this, but like they have to have their camera on and have to be once.
I feel like most of them are pretty good about that, but yeah, I mean, we do, we've started sending out kind of like tips
Etiquette?
and
Yeah.
etiquette, so I will include that in there.
I just wanted to ask that because that
That's
was like
probably-
the first one.
That's probably as far as you can go. Is make
Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah.
Don't do it while driving.
Please don't drive while in Arlington.
Well, and
Yeah,
the-
like,
who
keep your-
knows whether there were circumstances that were
Sure.
not.
Yeah, that's true.
Jennifer, did you have a comment about that?
Yeah, except you all have moved on. This is a couple of topics ago, but I wanted to throw in the an idea for simplifying the process, because I hear you. There's a lot for CDCAC to do. There's a lot for staff to do, and we've gotten feedback from applicants in the past that our proposal is really out of line from a grants management perspective. I mean, essentially, people can get $25,000, and there's a ton of work that they have to do for that. So we've tried to sort of move towards simplifying the proposals, which is part of why we sort of made fewer of the attachments required. But I mean, another way, if everyone wanted to review everything, we could look at really simplifying the proposal, and that would be nicer for CDCAC, and I think it'd definitely be nicer for applicants. The trade-off, of course, would be you wouldn't necessarily get all the information you needed or wanted, but maybe you could do that as part of the interview thing or something like that. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. I don't want to make it more burdensome for applicants, because from what we understand and my experience in grant writing, it's a lot for not that much money.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, and what we've seen a lot more out there just because the whole world has become much, faster and give me the bullets and that sort of thing, that, if there is information that we tend to process, like how many people are you serving? What 3 jurisdictions are they in? That's, we get them to do it in, bullets. And then if they wanted to have a little narrative that was around their story, then let that be narrative. But try and take it to a more, factual, bulletized, because that's kind of how we may be processing. So anyway, I just throw that out. But I'm more than happy to be part of a little task force to look at that if you want to.
Thank you for volunteering.
Sorry I said that.
I know you had tried to talk to them about consolidating some of their text, but a lot of the text is just repetitive and
right.
useless.
Yeah,
So if
right.
you can
So that's-
figure out what it is
yeah.
that counts and make it clear to them
Yeah.
that you don't need half a page to justify, 2-3 sentences, maybe answer.
Because it's way easier for them too.
Yeah, so,
Well, maybe along the lines of the question or the portion of the application where what are your strategies? List them out. What are your proposed outcomes? List them out. Like, that's helpful. Because then you just read through them and it's open enough that they can customize it to their own program. But maybe if we can make some more of the questions answerable like that.
Mhm.
That might help.
I can also restrict the word limits on in Zoom grants too, so that's another option. Although I usually get complaints when they're super short. People like to, write a lot and
Freestyle.
share, and but we can look into that.
I also like to recycle.
Yes.
And epic novel, yeah.
Oh, back to recycling.
Oh, yeah, oh, yes. Yeah, that was.
This has been a good discussion.
Yeah, I actually have one more question for you all. Sorry, and I know the one other thing that I wanted to just ask about was we switched up the way we were doing our subject matter expert reviews last year, where we were basically asking multiple staff from different county departments to review the applications, and then we provided their comments in written form on the summary sheets. Did you guys? We've changed it many times over the last five or so years, and I think it seemed to work okay. Did everyone? Is everyone okay with that?
It was my first time doing it, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I liked it a lot too.
it was a great
I thought it was
improvement.
really helpful.
It was added, a lot added.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll continue to do that next year too.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, and I'm probably not gonna bear with me. So on the eligibility stuff, and this is related to so as I understand it, anything that is funded through AHIP is a 2-year program, right? The reason I'm asking is because I think at least one program came in with like a 2-year project plan.
Yeah, some of them
That was
apply
kind of
specifically
confusing.
for.
So, okay, bear with me. So for eligibility, they kind of have to have a general sense of under which funding source they're going to be funded to determine whether they're eligible, right?
Right.
I mean, yes and no, yes. I mean, I think a lot of them do kind of tailor their proposals to a specific funding source, but, some are pretty general and could really fit under any of them.
So I guess my question is about someone who thinks that they're eligible likely under AHIP. They're probably going to come in with a 2-year.
Not necessarily.
Would it pay to specify that regardless of how you're funded and if you're funded with AHIP, your proposal should cover a 1-year project period? Does it matter? I don't know, but and I can see how it might be confusing. Do I feel like if I'm not sure how I'm going to be funded, should I propose a 1-year project or a 2-year project?
The ones that usually come in with the 2-year proposal are the ones that have gotten that funding before and are just used to it, and kind of tailor their proposals to being, a startup program that they understand that after 2 years they're not going to reapply for funding because it's really just to help get the program off the ground. So I mean, I'm open to hearing from other folks, but for me personally, it doesn't really make a huge difference.
Yeah,
for
I guess
me.
the question is, do we care? Like, does it affect how we evaluate? Okay.
I have a
question. I'm not on the commission yet, but
Yeah, please.
The goal is to get new applicants, right? At least like lately, it seems like the goal is also new applicants instead of repeat. How often do you get new applicants a year? That's my first question.
So it's actually increased quite a bit over the last 5 or so years. I think last year we had like 6 or 7 new applicants, but most of the time it's repeat applicants and organizations that have received funding in the past.
And given the goal and looks like an increased amount, is there examples of a good application or like something like that that is available for people who are interested in applying, who may be new?
Well, we've not done that before. I'm not opposed to it. I think we have to kind of really figure out what that example would look like without giving away like what
Sure.
organization it is. But yeah, that's an idea. I can look at that and see that there's a way to do that.
That would certainly
And
very
we
much.
do put in, we put in the NOFA.
The answer, sorry. And also even length. If your example shows that there's 4 sentences, it makes it much easier to do 4 sentences than to write 3 pages.
Yeah.
I will say the one reason that a lot of places do not do that is because they don't want people to. So they don't want just a like, I just filled in the blanks for my organization kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can see both sides of it completely, but just a reflection of a lot of grant issuers don't give a sample of a good application for that very reason. They'll they'll give like, here are some key things that good applications contain, like they're short and bulleted, or, they highlight X, Y, and Z, but they don't actually give one out. But that's just.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of how many proposals explained how many poor people there are in Arlington.
Yeah.
And they go on pages and pages of, you got poor people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that we do try to make really clear in the application is that, new applicants especially, we ask them to come to us with program ideas, because it really does help kind of talk through, what the idea is and whether it's eligible and whether a program like that has been successful in the past. And I got a lot of those calls last summer, actually. And, a lot of those programs did wind up applying for funding. I think that's, if you're ever talking to a potential applicant, definitely recommend that they contact staff, because it's a better proposal when it's finally submitted if they do that.
What's the ideal timing of it? Like in my experience, sometimes with other grants, if they come to us or to the grantor when the NOFA is released and say, here's my project, is this viable, will this work? It's too late, right? Like they're too early in the process to like get to a full application in time, right? But they're maybe too far along to wait a whole year. So I wonder if kind of in the middle, outside of the funding window.
I'll say that typically I get the calls once the application the NOFA has been released. But it can, we accept the calls year round.
Right.
There's nothing precluding them from calling me in February. But yeah, it definitely, usually I will say that when I get the calls, it's, they've been thinking about the program for a while, and they have a few ideas of what they're kind of going to propose, and they kind of talk through what how to shape it into a better application. I know, Jennifer, you have your hand up, and so I wanted to acknowledge.
Thanks. Well, you mentioned one of the things I was going to, which is we do encourage people to reach out, and I think that really does improve the proposal. We also do a NOFA workshop in July, about 2 weeks after the NOFA comes out, and we walk through the NOFA and encourage people to ask questions there. And then I also want to say we heard from, I think, 2 or 3 of the folks who did not get funded last year. We always offer that as a debrief. and did do that. So I think, that's helpful for people too who came in, what they could have strengthened, what, we take notes on y'all's conversations and kind of staff feedback. And so that helps people, I think, if they want to submit for a second year after they're not funded. So hopefully we provide enough assistance that they can, if they take advantage of it, they can put together a good proposal.
So one other thing you might want to think about is if you record your NOFA workshops, and you could post them from the prior year, with the caveat that the NOFA changes from year to year. But that way, if somebody's like in January thinking, I may want to think about this funding source, they can get a little bit of an insight into like, what does that really?
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah. Oh, you do. Okay, that's great. That's great.
Any other feedback about the NOFA? So just as a reminder, we're going to go back. We're going to incorporate some of the feedback that we received. It'll be released on the 5th of July. And then when we come back in September, I'll do a demo of our application review software, so that just as a refresher to everyone about how you actually go into the system and review the proposals and how do you score. Just keep that in mind, that pressure will be coming before you dig into it. Great. So I guess do you have a area report?
I think I was going to raise the issue of whether or not we tend to meet in July and August.
Yes, we typically
do
take
not,
those
right?
months off just because we have a busy fall.
That's something we get to vote on.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to try this again.
I move that we don't.
Okay,
Seconded.
okay, and now we all vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
But I suppose you'll have communication with us so that we don't fall asleep.
No, yes, I will definitely, I will keep you.
On.
Yep. All right. Sure, yeah.
So real quick, because I know we're right up against the time. The Housing Commission, we passed at the last meeting a equity framework. It's just like a 2 or 3 pager. And I can share with the group. But it sort of takes it was built off of the county's equity, I guess, framework or equity statement or something to that effect, as well as I think something that came out of the state, and it ended up just having like 5 questions in it in terms of like, as you're considering policies, as you're considering programs, sort of who does this, does this address existing populations that are burdened? Does this further burden an existing population? And it just is 5 quick questions, and we all thought it was a really good thing to just help keep us, whenever considering decisions that are relative to policy or actions, that we keep that framework. So I'm happy to share that. And then we also did our annual report for 2022. So to see what the Housing Commission's been up to the last year, you can look on our commission website and see that. Because as you know, from missing them, we were up to quite a bit. And in the last year or 2, the Housing Commission has approved a considerable number of supported units than they had in previous years. So there's a portfolio that's growing very large. I mean, not enough, still way not enough, but it's been growing faster than it was in previous.
Any other member reports? Great. I guess I'll just do a quick staff report, even though we have 1 minute. I'll make it very quick. There was an application that came in the last round of funding for 2024. You might have seen it in the Zoom grant system, but we didn't review it. It was called the Reeves Farmhouse Project. We're actually looking to provide funding to that project, CDBG funding, and we're working with a big interdepartmental group of staff to figure out how to do that. And if it goes through and it's we decide that it's that we want to recommend the funding, it will come before the CDCAC. And so the sort of the project overview right now is that the county currently owns Reeves Farmhouse. It's a historic property on the other side of the county in the Bluemont neighborhood.
Say the name again slower.
Reeves Farmhouse.
Oh, Reeves.
Yeah. And it's the last operating dairy farm in the county. And you've probably seen it if you've ever been to Bluemont Park. It's this big white house that kind of sits in the middle of the park. But it's been vacant for 20 years. And the county is looking to convey the property to Habitat for Humanity, and they want to turn it into a group home for persons with disabilities. So we think it's a great project, and it's a great use for community development block grant funding, but there are a lot of federal requirements that have to be looked at, and so we're in the process of getting all that figured out, and there are some other site plan issues that have to be addressed to be able to actually redevelop the property. So we're hoping to bring that before the board in September, and if we do that, then you guys will consider it at the September for recommendation to the board. So I wanted to provide that update just so that you guys had that on your radar. So because if you start hearing stuff about it in the community or people are talking about it, that's what's going on. So we're really excited about the project.
CSB is very supportive.
Yeah, it's a good news story because it's one of those. It's a project that's been
Trying to figure out
everything.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's a great use for it, and it'll provide a resource in the county that's much needed. But again, just have a lot of things that need to be figured out to be able to make it happen. Stay tuned. That's all I got. Jennifer, did you have any staff report?
Nope, I didn't have anything.
Great. To adjourn. Great. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So much.
Have a good summer.
Good
Have a nice summer. Bye.
Enjoy. So when are you joining? Happy